Britain is broken. Really astonishing poll. The shock survey shows that Reform are heading for major gains in the local elections. We can't obviously talk about that for Purdah, but on a wider scale, Farage beating Keir Starmer head-to-head. Nothing in this survey about Kemi Badenoch or the Tories recovering. This is all about reform. And I think it is fair to just take five and go, it is extraordinary the noise that these 4 MPs have made when you consider there's 650 in the chamber.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, they are the opposition now. They are the official opposition. I think you have politicians like Robert Jenrick who are doing actually a pretty good job of trying to take the fight to Labour. But, he's not in charge. He's not Kemi. And I think Kemi had an opportunity at the beginning to restate what her party was about. She's lost it. And, well, in politics, a week is a long time. Farage is doing these stunts every single day. He's fighting for these local elections like hell, absolutely fine. He's got people up there knocking on doors.
And sort of tried to make the point that I don't swallow as an ex-Tory voter this we're resetting, we're thinking about where we went wrong. I can tell you where you went wrong. High taxation, you didn't deal with immigration, you didn't say what you were going, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. There are less police, there's more crime. Britain is on the verge of almost sort of social anarchy, and that's not me making any sort of conspiratorial comment. Get your head out your backside, Kemi Badenoch. Come out and speak, but you're not speaking to the people, and you're absolutely right. Farage is gaining traction because he's actually talking about things, whether it was the Manchester bombings, where those 2 Pakistani gentlemen were not charged for months and months, but the policeman was suspended overnight. Both wrong, in my opinion, but they pick these things up, like the Southport riots. He spoke about that the day after and was banned by the Speaker, Farage, in Parliament from asking a question that now everybody goes, yeah, the government did know more. So, for me, he's sort of grasped the nettle, hasn't he?
Well, I mean, you can't be an opposition party if the governing party can turn around and say, well, what did you do for the 14 years you were in power? It doesn't matter how good your comms operation is, you haven't got an answer to that. You failed. I would say, to be honest with you, the miserable thing, and it makes my dad happy, because my dad always used to go on about the winter of discontent. He always used to be like, you think you've got it tough,
That's what I keep talking about on here, and they laugh at me. 1979, the winter of discontent was dreadful. Great, you've called me like your dad now. That's all we need, isn't it? Brilliant, thanks.
Well, here we go, though. Gen Z, we've got summer of discontent. So now we can bore our children about it in 20 years' time. We can say, remember the time there were rats the size of dogs running around the streets of Birmingham? Remember the time you let terrorists wander around and take control of prisons?
And can I tell you something I found out last week, which is the assistant comment editor of the Telegraph, you probably know, but I do think it's worth telling people again on this show. I found this out because we did a piece of work on this situation in Birmingham, and we interviewed a couple of local people. The argument in the past, Poppy, which is, local governments say, central government doesn't give us enough money, we need more money. The truth about Birmingham Council, which is skint, and yes, it's a Labour council and other councils, including Tories, have messed up, is they invested in property. They took their money from central government and they decided to invest in commercial property all across Birmingham, whilst delaying paying pay rises or giving drops in council tax. And then the bottom fell out of the property market. And in fact, it would be fair enough to say that the council leaders of Birmingham gambled with the money that was due the people of Birmingham city centre and in the town. That's an appalling indictment, isn't it?
No, where will the heads roll? There will be no consequences for the people who have bankrupted this country. This is why the country doesn't work. People can take taxpayers' money, they can fritter it away on stupid schemes they know won't work, and then when they get found out, they go, oh, sorry, I'm going to keep taking my 6-figure job, and I'm just going to carry on as before, and nothing gets fixed. There are no consequences for failing. We all have to deal with it, but the people who actually make the decisions don't. And I would also say about Birmingham Council, I know that 90% of their budget is being spent on social care. That is the fault of central government.
Yes.
But it's their fault that they're spending so much money on these dodgy taxi ferrying schemes they've got going on. I mean, has anyone actually gone through their finances and gone, hang on, where's all this money being spent? They haven't got the scrutiny. Someone from central government needs to get up there and go, hang on,
I haven't seen anybody from the cabinet in Birmingham. They're steadfastly refusing to go there, and it's hardly surprising because, and we'll bring it back here, and people do not like this, and they think I am being anti-Labour. Sharon Graham, I'd like to point out she's no relation to Mike Graham in a million years. Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of Unite, has today said that she would give the green light for action in these other areas if councils continue to target low-paid workers. This will start to unravel. This is the same as Starmer talking about house building. You can have an ideology, but there are too many people on the left in positions of power that won't let this happen. Sharon Graham is prepared to say we'll create carnage across the United Kingdom. And I'll say something, and Ryan's going to do that sideways to the sky. By Christmas, the army will be on the streets. There you are. I promise you that's what will happen, because all the unions will want 30%, and Starmer is going to go, oh, God, we haven't got the money. And they're going to go, but you're only there because of us, mate. We're going to screw you back. That's what happened last time. And
here's the other funny thing. Why did the strike start in the first place? Yes, it's the unions asking for more money, but it's also because of equality pay lawsuits. The council literally couldn't pay the bin men the amount that they wanted, because then they have to pay people who are doing completely different jobs the same amount because of equality law. And that's the fault of the Tories again. So, whatever way you go, you have to blame them for this. I don't like the Labour Party. I think that's pretty obvious. But, this is a failure of politicians. It's not parties, it's politicians.
I agree.
They have all failed.
I agree. I mean, when we started talking 3 years ago, when I came here, I was sort of extolling the virtues of Boris Johnson. But the more I've dug and I've thought about, his obsession with net zero as against true conservatism. I mean, yesterday, or rather last week, the British Steel disaster. He headed the government that sold British Steel to that Chinese, asset-rich via the Communist Chinese Party company. So, yeah, you're right, mistakes by politicians, but those strikes probably will spread. This broken Britain, though, which is what I wanted to ask people their opinion about. I'm just throwing it out there for people. A bit of fun for a Tuesday. What's the best thing about Britain? Somebody's just put Poppy. What's the worst thing about Britain? Jezza. Great, that's nice, isn't it? I'm fine with that. I'm a big boy. In terms of where you see us as a country, do you genuinely believe that Reform, 4 seats, a newish party, could be in a position of power, or do you think they'll win sort of 60 and 70 in the long run, a bit like the Liberal Democrats?
I think they will win. I was saying to people after the election, the Tories are dead. Whether or not Reform are going to get majority government is another question. The more I've watched the anger that people have for establishment politicians, the more certain I am that Reform will actually muster together a majority. I think there are various electoral reasons for it, but I also think it's the mood of the country. The question now is, when Reform get in, and I know there's a long time, they've got 4 years to plan, completely understand that, how are they going to avoid making the same mistakes the Tories did? Because I like what they say, but I liked what the Tories said, and they didn't do it. So it's not just enough to say we're not like the others. At this point, I would like to see some policies coming out where I'm like, yes, if you can do that, you're going to go a long way to fixing the problem.
I said it.
I think they can absolutely win. I said it
to Richard Tice yesterday. I think you're brilliant in terms of what you said. You always say it much better than me. I am also taken with the rhetoric. OK, because I spoke very candidly about voting for them last time because as a Tory I didn't believe that true conservative values were being adhered to. But then I got even more angry when the Tory party would say that's far right. No, it's not. It's what we were brought up on, and I hate that label. But like you, I want more meat on the bone. And like you, Richard and Nigel can say we're going to stop the boats. We're going to get rid of the blob. How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Because nobody has done it. Nobody that's ever got into power. We look at what's happening in the United States and everybody goes, oh, my God, he's a nightmare. The fact is Donald Trump might be many things and might be loathed by millions and loved and adored by equal measure of millions. But he does exactly what he says he's going to do, and he doesn't give a toss who's upset about it.
Absolutely. The problem is when your opposition is so rubbish, you can get away with not actually putting things on the table. You can just point at them and go, look, they're awful. We're not them. That's what the Labour Party did to win the last election. So I don't really want that to happen again. I agree that they're awful, but I want to see why you're good. Tell me why you're going to do something differently.
How are you going to do it? I mean, I can sit in this chair and go, there are 10,000 civil servants blatantly taking the mickey in Whitehall. Too many who don't work in the building and are taking advantage of a system. But then I sort of look at that, strangely, like this whole country. We have a benefit system that's taken advantage of. We have an immigration system that's taken advantage of. We have an NHS that's taken advantage of. We have political people. And actually what's really interesting for me is what makes it worse, and I think this is why there is public anger, is not only are there loopholes that everybody else seems to find, but the very people who should be getting the medical attention, the chance to come to this country, the safety, they're missing out. Those people, that's why there's anger, and I've said it for months.
Yeah.
You know, this is about the average man and woman, the jams, just about managing north of Watford Gap. Yes, political elite, there is part of a country north of Watford Gap who don't ever, do you know what I mean, Poppy? They never break the law. They pay their bills, they bring their kids up, they don't have much spare cash, and they're going, why don't I just break the law? Why don't I just come in on the dinghy? Why am I living my life perfectly? Because these people who are taking the PISS out of this country are doing better than me.
You read my mind. You know, I actually got into a bit of an argument with a British transport police officer, which probably isn't wise, but I was so angry because I saw someone push in front of the barrier as this old lady was walking past, really push right up behind her, which is not pleasant. It's happened to me before. And I said, look, you saw that happen. I saw you look. You didn't do anything. You looked down on your phone. So can I do that? And he goes, no, you can't do that. And I was like, well, why? Why am I paying £9 every day to travel into work? And I think that's what a lot of people think in the UK at the moment. They go, why do I bother paying for my shopping? Like, why don't I just not scan it? Why don't I just walk out? You're not going to arrest me. Why am I paying my taxes? You clearly don't care. You know, and that's really dangerous. The government, if lots of people who are good, hard-working people start thinking like that, it's really hard to get them to trust you again. Really hard.
I think what's dangerous is this belief that which is, God, I am sounding like my dad or your dad, that doing the right thing and behaving correctly, it doesn't matter or mean anything anymore. I mean, it happened to me, I've said it happened to me in a lift here at News UK 2 weeks ago. I'm in the lift with a woman, stops on the ground floor, say ladies first, looked at me honestly as if I'd gone into her house on Christmas Day and burgled her Christmas presents. And you laugh, but what am I supposed to do? If I jump out first, I'm going to be slagged off. And you find yourself nowadays, I think, watching what you say, all of us who live our lives or try and live our lives correctly, and yet people can get away with awful behaviour. They can find loopholes, they can take the mickey, and they seem to get away with it.
Yeah. I mean, look, you asked the question, what's the best and the worst thing about Britain? I still think the best thing is the people who try and do right, and the worst thing is the people that try and take the mick. It's as simple as that. But the problem is that society is weighted in favour of those people who don't want to play by the rules and don't want to play fair.
Why, Poppy? Why?
Well, because the government... The reason is that the government don't really care. They want an easy life. They are very affected by peer pressure. They don't want to be asked difficult questions. So they haven't let things get really bad all of a sudden. It's been a slow process over a couple of decades where they've avoided making the tough decisions that need to be done. Go, well, I'll leave it to the next person. That's too difficult. Or, the policing's not being funded. Well, I've got to put money in this constituency. So, they've avoided doing the actual thing that they're supposed to do, which is govern. And we've now got to a situation where all these little things have added up. And we're at a crisis point. Now we've got bins that aren't being collected in Birmingham. Now we've got terrorists who are in charge of prisons. It's not all just come at once. No. This has been a slow process. And there have been those of us who have been yelling for years, this is what's coming. And now the chickens have come home to roost.
Couldn't agree more. Are you happy if we go? Let's just play a voice note very quickly. Jay on Broken Britain, go.
I've just seen on the news that we're about to donate, David Lammy is going to donate 120 million to Sudan. I thought there was no money in the pot. All these donations, and look, don't get me wrong, the people of Sudan probably need it. But, we're donating to Ukraine, we're donating here, we're donating there. China have got money galore, buying up our British steel and everything else that goes around the world in Africa and here everywhere, all the minerals, etc. What are they donating to? Have a look, Google it, you'll be quite surprised. They literally don't donate to anyone.
And you see, in the past, somebody like Jay or a station like this would have been frowned upon and people would have said, what is this? What is this? Jay speaks for many, many people. He said, I can't imagine what it's like living in Sudan. But right now, I can't imagine what it's like living in Birmingham. I can't imagine living on a rundown council estate north of Watford Gap where there's absolutely no chance of anything other than crime, drugs and dreadful, dreadful things. And I said something today, Poppy, which got criticised, obviously. Is it not a time when we should be thinking, I'm sorry, but charity begins at home? Sorry, that's how I see it.
look at the people who are obsessed with foreign aid. I mean, it's like Rory Stewart's wife. It's people who are much more interested in solving problems across the world rather than walking up to a different street and seeing
Rory
that people
Stewart's
actually
wife
suffer
and
in the
Rory
pain.
Stewart don't live in anything other than wonderful splendour, probably in
Well, there you
Chelsea.
go.
People like that do my
there you
head
go.
in. What?
Here's a statistic I love. Outside of London, if you took London outside of the UK, the rest of the UK would be as poor as Slovakia.
Wow.
What's being done for that?
Yeah.
I mean, where's the charity in that?
And that was actually, by the way,
people?
that was my biggest now anger towards Johnson. I thought levelling up was a fantastic idea, and it just didn't happen. HS2, all of that rubbish, just not thought through. But you're right, and in fact, the frustration that people feel is palpable, isn't it?
Yeah, because there's no dignity. There's literally no dignity in this. You shouldn't have to beg for scraps from the government. You know, people have a right to have a decent job. They have a right to be safe in their streets. They have a right to not have rats, you know, running around their house because the council won't take the bins out. That's not asking the world. If the government can't do that, they need to move out of the way, and we need to get people in who can act, because this cannot go on anymore. It is broken Britain. You know, we're a failed state.
Couldn't agree more, Poppy. Well, listen, now you've done this, you see, for 20 minutes, and you've realised that your dad and I are completely the same person. Tell him I remember the winter of discontent and green goddesses. Lovely to have you on. We'll get you back on very soon. Thank you so much indeed.